Hello! Today we are going to go over catalog management. That spans not only creation of catalogs, but also managing the items within the catalog. So if you haven't already, I suggest going to our YouTube channel and watching catalogs for end users, and that will kind of show you how the end user interacts with our catalogs in COUPA. For buyers, I kind of want to go over exactly what a catalog is, how a catalog would be created, and then we'll get into catalog management, such as adding and removing items. So the first thing is catalogs. Technically, from an end user standpoint, really fast, catalog is basically just an internally managed list of items that we already have pricing for, we already have an agreement for, and that they can order kind of as necessary without buyer interaction. How do you get a catalog set up? So every catalog we have is listed in the catalog section, and it's by supplier, so you can start typing and it'll give you a list of the suppliers out there. And then for every catalog that we have created, there is a contract that's linked to the catalog. So just like all of our other contracts, they are loaded in the contracts repository. Now, there's two types of contracts in COUPA. First is the one that we load at a property level, right? Where it's a signed agreement, it has terms and conditions, and we are using that to link to a billing PO. So we load those all day long as they're signed, as they're sourced, and those are also loaded here. The second type of contract is a catalog contract. Those are only created at the service center from the e-procurement team. Now you might be asking yourself, what's the difference? That's a really good question. So from a system perspective, there's virtually almost no difference except we're going to show you guys this one. So the signature landscape contract. And you can see all the information is here, spend because of all of the linked POs and invoices, all of the information for the actual contract. The actual contract with signatures and terms and conditions is listed here. And then you can see there's no items linked to this agreement. Okay, it's literally just the agreement itself, and then any purchase orders that are used for billing documents are linked here. So that's the first type of contract that's really governed by a signed agreement. The type we're focusing on today is a catalog contract. So how do you determine if an item is a catalog contract or not? The easiest way is to use the advanced search button and type in catalog contract is yes, and then I always like to look at active ones. So when we search, we will see that these are all of the active contracts that have catalogs. Now, as kind of a little bit so you can see the difference, we'll go into the Robertson Supply, and it looks virtually identical at first, right? You can see there's purchase orders linked, there's invoices linked, and there is details of the contract itself. Now, you can see, we're going to talk about this later, the justification of this setup. So we all know when we do signed contracts, we are supposed to be sourcing those, seeing if we can find a better deal, negotiating those, and that is all included in the contract material, where a catalog contract is usually just pricing of items. So literally, there's no backing document. We know that there's a sourcing event we can go look at to see pricing and term. The biggest difference you're going to see is in the items. So you can see there's items attached to this contract. So that's how like a governing agreement contract works and then a catalog contract works in COUPA. So as you can see, there's items attached here, and we can see the price, the unit of measure, and somewhere in here, there can either be a reference to a sourcing event, or you can actually have like a pricing agreement. So an example of that would be this L'Oreal agreement, where you can see there's a lot of items, and then as I scroll down, there's no sourcing event listed, but as you can see, there are actual documents telling us that this is how we got quotes. this is how we determine this pricing, and this is how long this pricing is going to last. So that is how contracts are set up. So if I wanted to set up a contract, the first thing I would need to do is, one, make sure that the items don't exist in another agreement. And I can always do that by searching through items. Once I've determined that the items don't exist elsewhere, I can actually send a request to get a catalog contract created in COUPA by eProcurement. Now, what documents do I need? So the first one is I either need a pricing agreement, right? Which is basically what tells me that this is the information, this is how the items have been determined, and these are, in fact, the item lists with pricing. So here in a second, I'm going to show you guys. This is an example of the L'Oreal list. So this is from the supplier themselves. This has the current price. This has the list of items. This is the supplier quote. Okay. So it can be just as simple as a quote saying, these are the items. This is how long we're going to charge you this price. This is how much it costs. Okay. The second thing I'm going to need is a backing document. So proof that I took this out to bid, what the bid results are, and why we're awarding to this particular supplier. So in the Robertson Supply example, we just sent in all of the information from the sourcing event, and they use that as a backing document or justification for this catalog contract. Now, in the L'Oreal contract, there is actually an exception form loaded. So this is the property exception form that they use that basically says this supplier is the only supplier we can use, and for this reason, and it does go into exceptional detail as to why. So you need to have the justification of why you're awarding to this supplier. Okay, that's the second thing you need before you send it out to eProcurement. The third thing you need is the item information filled out. So we're not just going to send this pricing list to eProcurement and say, hey, could you set up all these numbers? Oh no. We are actually going to send in an item request form. Now you can locate the item request form in your P&G COUPA team under Procurement, under Files, and there is going to be an Excel there's going to be an Excel file as soon as I can open this up in here for item creation. The first thing you're going to do is download this to your computer. Do not edit this in Teams. This is a blank file for everyone to start using. So I'm going to download this. Now, the important thing is to not change how this is formatted, and I'm going to show you guys that here in just a second. So you can see from my downloads, it's right here. I'm going to open up my item creation form, and in my item creation form, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read my warning, and it's like, hey, this has a lot of information in it. I'm going to enable editing, and then it's always going to ask me, hey, there's some content in here. It's been disabled for now. I want to enable this content. And what that's going to do is it's going to enable all the cool features of this form for me to be able to use it. Now I'm going to fill out the form. This form should include all the information for the items that are included in my catalog request. So all of the items that were included in my bid, all of the items that are going to be included in this catalog. You can add items later, you can delete these later, but just as a starting point, this is what you want to do. Now, the top section here is basically just asking how this item is going to be set up from like a really large perspective. So the property you're going to click it, and it's going to pop up this little selection. This is where you select what property these items are going to be accessible to. Most of the time for us, it's going to be one, maybe two properties if we're doing two. So I'm basically going to say, I want this one to be for Lawrenceburg, and then I'm going to hit, and then if it's a warehouse item, and if you've already worked out that this is going to be put in the warehouse with your warehouse manager team, you can also select the warehouse at this time. In this example, we're just going to be doing directs, so I'm going to hit OK. The supplier will automatically start filtering. So as I start typing, it's going to give me information, and this is pulling from the COUPA item supplier master. So I'm going to select my supplier. It's automatically going to populate my supplier number. I'm going to fill in my name as the requester. I'm going to give my phone number in case eProcurement has a question for me or a comment for me, they can call. The approver here is going to be who at the service center manages this commodity. Okay, so Corey, all food and beverage, anything edible, anything consumable, that's going to be Corey Johnson. And then Serene and Melissa kind of have split those categories into, like, Serene manages a bunch and Melissa manages the other half. So if you're not sure, you can check teams, and in our sourcing channel, you can use your critical thinking skills to determine who potentially manages this commodity. If you're not entirely sure, you can email them and ask. You can email eProcurement and ask. Or you can select one or the other and then send this to both of them for their review and approval. So I would suggest asking. Specifically, you can always email eProcurement. They can answer any question for you. Once you get the answer, you're going to select. And it's important because this is the person you're going to send this to first for their approval. Now, this button, contract number, so if you're adding to an existing contract or removing, this is the only time you'll use this field. And then, is this a bid file item? So if you are going to manage the pricing of these items in the bid file, then you would select yes. So the pricing tool. So you guys have received training on that. It's the little icon on your desk where all of our pricing bids are managed, or our pricing for vendors is managed. So if you're going to manage the pricing through that supplier, this needs to be yes. If you're not, this needs to be no. Now, I would say for me personally, I do not like to create catalogs for items that I do not have an agreement on for at least 6 months, right? The whole point of this is efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. So does that mean the pricing of your items is going to remain consistent for that 6 months? Maybe not. So in some fields, maybe you've worked out a markup structure with your supplier and they've won the bid that way. Those are perfectly acceptable. So if your pricing is going to be a preset cost for the entire length of your agreement, you will not manage the pricing through the bid tool. You are going to rebid that out and update your pricing manually through this process every 6 months, a year, 3 years, whatever your bid frequency is. Now, if the pricing is not going to be stable, meaning that you've awarded this supplier the business based on a markup, whether they're sole source or not, that is because that you will manage in the bid tool itself. So that's the yes or no. And then if you've negotiated shipping terms of your agreement, you would select the shipping terms available. So that's the top portion of our form. Now we get into the bottom portion of our form. So this portion is super easy because there are instructions here at the bottom. It lays out how item descriptions are supposed to be entered in here. It lays out what stock status is, the manufacturer information and where it comes from, supplier information and where it comes from, commodity and how you would select pricing, and tags. So it lays out all that information. So as we're going through here and filling things out, you can see in some things, it's just a free text where you would type things. You can select a URL for images, or you can attach images to your request, and that way your item will have pictures in COUPA. The manufacturer information and supplier information is necessary. Yes, this will require research. It is very important that you know the manufacturer name and their information and the supplier part number and their information. Stock status, and then you get into commodities. If you have a Stratton Warren number or a P&K item number. So in this case, if you are creating an item in your catalog and you know the item already exists in COUPA, same manufacturer information, you can in fact find the P&K item number and type it in your form. This will help eProcurement create your item numbers faster. So I would wholeheartedly recommend putting time and energy into this field. Now, here's where we get into some cool features of the form. If your item is F&B, meaning if it is a consumable, food or beverage, you'll hit yes. Notice this turns this pinkish orange color. That means you have to fill out the pinkish orange columns. If you select no, your item remains white and you do not have to fill out these columns. Inventory. If I select yes, notice it turns yellow. You will see back here, there are some yellow columns. If this is going to be in my warehouse, I need to make sure this is filled out. If I select no, this is not an inventory item, it stays white and I do not need to fill out the yellow forms. Now notice everywhere the columns are white, I need to fill those out anyway. And then as I fill it out and I'm done, I won't put anything in this field. As I am finished filling out my item request, I am going to run validation. It is going to turn green if I have all the correct information. It is going to turn red if I'm missing information. If I'm missing information, I will scroll all the way to the last file, and it will tell me what information I am missing. Once I fill out all this information, I'm going to save this document, and I'm going to email eProcurement plus my commodity manager, Serene or Melissa or Corey, all my information we just talked about. So the backing document explaining why this vendor was awarded the business, the pricing information about how I got the information, whether it's a sourcing event or a pricing file, and I'm going to email them my item form. Once I email that form, my sourcing partner or my commodity manager is going to ask me some questions, approve or deny my request, and then eProcurement is going to go in and load all of that information into COUPA. That is how catalogs are created. Now, you may be wondering, well, Nikki, what happens if one of my items is discontinued? Perfectly fine. You're going to make sure that you get all the information. So if I know this particular bowl is now being discontinued, I am going to email this information, the bowl information, as well as this information. So the contract, so my catalog contract information. I'm going to email the supplier information. I'm going to email my item information. I'm going to email that to eProcurement and say, this item was discontinued. Please make this non-available. And they will go discontinue. They'll take it out of the system. If I need to add things, same process, except if the agreement is still valid and I need to add items, I would just create the item form and send that in, and that is where I would select the drop-down where I tell them the existing contract I need it added to. So in this case, if I were to add something to my Robertson contract, I would have to put the information in here. I would have to select all the same stuff we did the first time. I would just use this form, and in this field here, where it says current contract, if one already exists, I would actually type in my contract name right here. Okay. So when I do that, that is what tells eProcurement to add this item to this agreement. And then when this item is added, you will manage it the same way you manage all the other items on the agreement, either through the bid tool or through rebidding every 6 months, a year, whatever your frequency is. So that is how you create and manage catalog items for yourself. In some cases, you will find that you want to add items to existing contracts. So in this particular instance, let's say that I would like to add some items to this Gem State Paper Company agreement. Okay, that's fine. If I need to add something to this and this is accessible to my property, that's totally fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to check the owner's name, and I'm going to notice that the owner of this contract is Jonathan Tatum. I need to work with Jonathan to get items added to this agreement. So it's not up to me to add items to an agreement that someone else owns and manages. Okay, I'm going to do this. Now, there are going to be in some instances where you can see the owner has been termed. Now, necessarily, you're still going to need approval of your commodity manager. In this case, if you would like to take ownership of this contract and you would like to own this moving forward and the current owner is termed, you can ask eProcurement to make you the owner moving forward. So that is how kind of management of that goes and how you collaborate with other people around the company to ensure that there's one owner of a catalog contract and that they know everything that's on it. Now, let's say, for instance, I find an agreement like this Robertson contract, and I notice Nikki's the owner, and I notice that the only property that has access to this is Cactus Pete's. Well, let's say when I was looking through items and I was trying to find a source for my property in Council Bluffs, I noticed that their annual softener salt price is fantastic, and I also want to use that. So let's say I contact Robertson and I'm like, hey, what are the conditions of you adding me to this? I can also contact Nikki and say, hey, I'd like to add Council Bluffs onto your contract. You know, can we kind of see the details of making that happen? And then you can work with the owner to add your property to this contract and get the same pricing potentially. So that is another aspect of catalog management. And as a buyer, that's kind of the different avenues you can use to get your property the best pricing out there and to be the most efficient you can in the use of catalogs and setting them up. So hopefully this has helped, and I hope you guys have a good day.